You want to build your Derby car like the big boys and think you can't afford it? Think again. Become a Jegs Triple D Insider today and save 5 to 20% off exclusive high-performing Jegs parts. Last year, it was the Derby industry's best value when it came to saving your hard-earned money, and Triple D Entertainment has taken it to the next level. Get 20% off online tickets for Triple D events, preferential seating at those events, priority inspection, and friendly photo options for drivers. Get a Triple D licensed t-shirt and get coupon codes for apparel and events during the year. All this value for $99 with just a couple clicks at TripleDEntertainmentLLC.com and go to the Become an Insider button. Jegs and Triple D Entertainment, built by the drivers, for the drivers.
Episode 5 of the War Room. We have Jarrod Blades from Blade Steel Supply joining us today. We're going to go over some really good topics. But the main reason why we have Jarrod on here is he threw a couple points my way over Messenger, and I love when someone debates me, okay, and brings some topics to me that, you know, hey, I want to rebuttal on. And for a long time, I've been saying this, you know, that the Derby world has missed a media or people critiquing, okay, certain aspects of the Derby world. And I've invited this frequently. It just seems like there's not a lot of people that will do it. And I think we got a really good one today for some back and forth debate on, you know, format, the future of Demolition Derby, and how we've got here. So Jarrod, thanks for joining us today.
Anytime at all. Literally any. And by any time, I mean, if I send Dustin a message at 3 a.m., he will respond and ask me to be on his podcast 2 hours later. That's literally what happened.
Yeah, well, I try to respond to most messages, you know, and I think that's our job as a promoter to do that. So I appreciate all the feedback, good, bad, even when you don't agree with me. I still answer.
Hey, a world full of yes men is more useless than somebody who will tell you what they're thinking, you know?
Yeah, I don't want to live in a vacuum. I want people to critique what or an echo chamber, I guess is what they say, right? An echo chamber. I don't want to live in that. I want people to critique, and that's how we've got to where we're at with the format. And people, mostly my buddies, saying this won't work because of this or that or whatever, but I encourage it and invite it from anyone.
Big picture, we don't know if the format necessarily is going to work or not because it's so new. So I think it's too early to say it won't work. But you're a bold promoter, and that will bring in more, you know, opinions and not quite controversy, but more feedback than just a normal, just another guy that comes in and says, okay, here's the rules, here's my shows. You know, you're actually trying to change how the Derby is ran, you know, how the heats are actually done. And you're going to get more feedback than, so I'm sure you have messages and all that. So
yeah, let's go into that. Okay. And let's talk about how I came up with the format and the reasoning the format even exists. Okay.
Sure.
We felt like there was some inherent problems with Demolition Derby. Okay. To take this sport to the next level and actually for it to be an actual sport. Okay. And if you think about it, a sport has a champion. Okay. It has a regular season, playoffs, MVP. They're competing for a certain title. Okay. And they're creating invested interest for fans. They're creating entertainment, all right, to an outside audience that they're always trying. Every sport's always trying to grow and trying to grow their niche market. And we were missing all that. Okay, we were missing in the Demolition Derby world, to bring it back. We were missing fast-paced, action-packed entertainment. There was always sandbagging. There was always teaming. We were missing invested interest from the fans because we didn't allow our drivers or give our drivers a stage to brand themselves, to make their names. Okay, so when you go back to the format, that's the whole essence of why we created it. We felt like in the past, and you tell me if I'm wrong, a driver's skill, okay, there was always this carrot that was dangling out there. All right. And the carrot was $10,000 to win. That was the benchmark for 25 years.
Quite a
Okay.
while.
And how do you win that carrot? Well, you are the best at avoiding contact. Would you disagree?
Sadly, no. That's how 99.9% of shows are won these days.
Exactly. And I'm telling you right now, Jarrod, you've watched some shows in the past. I'm not going to name any specific shows, but a 3-hour feature, I fall asleep watching. How are we ever going to entertain an outside audience?
Not doing that.
No, there's never been any answers to that. Okay.
Right.
So that carrot, right? The carrot I was talking of, 10 grand. Well, you were rewarded by doing your best to avoid contact within the restrictions of the rules of making contact every minute. Okay. Now listen, I don't care about the minute or minute 20 or 50 seconds or whatever, because there is some subjectivity to all sports. I mean, we talked about basketball earlier and the fouls and what's a foul and what's not. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I felt is I grew up in Mercer County, and I grew up watching certain names, okay, that have become synonymous with Demolition Derby. The Bronze, Zizelmans, Hileys of the area. Browders were always, a mainstay at the Mercer County Fair. And these guys, how they drove was they picked fights, okay? Each one of them picked fights, they won their war, and they kind of had fun doing it. All right. And that's just how I learned to drive. And also about that's like the basis of the format. Okay. In which we're not measuring your talent based on how well you can avoid cars. We're going to measure your talent based on how well or how calculated you can take cars out, meanwhile keeping your car clean. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So there's step one of the format, right? And which is really, really neat, because now we have something that we can sell. We have something that we can showcase, because we're actually going to have the best of the best, okay, going against each other for the first time ever, and fresh cars. I can't name a show where that really happens. The bigger names, or it doesn't matter, anybody really gets after it, except for at the end of the Derby, but their cars are crippled or whatnot.
Unless you get an occasional hot-headed driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a promoter, you're just like asking for that, like you're begging for that for entertainment purposes, right?
Yep.
So we've all been to derbies where the topic of discussion is so and so doesn't like so and so, but we never fully take advantage of that as a derby world. We're intrigued, okay? Other fans are intrigued, but we never highlight it and allow the atmosphere to build around that action. That's a problem. I call that invested interest from the fans. So another reason why the format, the way we run it, is it's creating that. It's going to create the underdog. It's going to create the favorite. It's going to create the sleeper. And people in the stands, they're going to be able to pick one. I like the 31 car. I like the 3 car. I like, whatever. Maybe it's best bet, or it's on paint jobs, or it's a wagon that they like, or the design of the car, or whatever it is. Okay, they're invested, which is really, really neat. What are your thoughts on that?
So I was at Prequel to the King. I watched it in person. That giant flag just says, okay, we're going to put a good show on. That's the first thing that Triple D does. The flag is as big as the track. They said, okay, we're here. We got a Triple D show. It's going to be a good show. Okay. The format, 1 versus 1 versus 1. It puts to the drivers and fans that haven't been to a Triple D show, what it is it's 3 cars with their sticks painted the same color, and you go against the other 2 guys, and then whoever wins the 1 versus 1 versus 1 will go to the feature. And then there's like there's 15 cars on the track. So you've got 5 groups of 3, and the individual winners of those groups of 3 will get pulled for the feature. That's how the Triple D format works. It's a lot different than just having everybody on the track and then you pull 5 or pull 3, or that, like say Mayhem, they'll have a time limit or whatever. So that's why I call Dustin a bold promoter, is he is offering a lot of money to win. He has a big name sponsor, and he has changed the format of his demolition derbies. So the reason that he wanted me to come on his podcast today was I messaged him last night and I said, hey, what if your format was a little bit different? And Dustin agreed with me, and he has a lot better points to keep it that way than what mine were, because I forgot that you're trying to do 2 different things simultaneously. Dustin is trying to elevate the sport to the next level, and he's trying to crown a true champion at the same time. And my thoughts on that were, it's really, really tough to do that. And Dustin wanted my opinion on that. And what it was back in the 90s, there was actually a time where demolition derbies were on TV. And basically how they were picked was the promoters sent drivers to the shows, and they were hosted by like these celebrities. And what went on there was TNN Motorsports, is what I'm talking about. What happened was season 1 of TNN Motorsports, the demo derbies were formatted in a 2-minute shootout, and then they had a 40-minute feature. So they had 2-minute shootout, commercial break, 2-minute shootout, commercial break, all night long, and then they had a 40-minute feature. Well, what happened was season 2 of it, the TV studio, they didn't film it the same way as they did the first year, so it kind of dissolved. So we're kind of sitting here saying, what happened? Well, I mean, how do we get it back to that? Well, in my opinion, I mean, we should just start there and look at, you know, when it was at that level. Let's look at how it got there and how it got to where it's at now, and let's just start there.
Well, so you make a couple great points. Okay, when it was at the pinnacle, and we'll call the TV, deal the pinnacle of the sport, the format changed. Why did the format change? Why did they change the format? Let's think about that.
The format changed for watchability on TV. So this is one of the points that I brought up earlier about taking the sport to the next level, is how to get it back to what it was. So they changed the way that the demo derby was ran for watchability on TV, for marketing, for commercial breaks and all that. And another example of that is if you watch the NBA back in the 90s, if you watch like Michael Jordan play the New York Knicks, there was a whistle every 10 or 15 minutes. There was a lot more defense. There was a lot more traveling. They'd call illegal defense. They'd call this, they'd call that. And in the early 2000s, they actually did away with that for watchability purposes. Same thing with the NFL. There's actually a rule in the NFL that every field has to be green. And the reason for that is that some college fields are red and black, and they've got all these different colors, blue, Well, the NFL actually has a rule that says every field has to be green. And you don't realize that as a player or even as an everyday person, unless you have read up on it, which is what I've kind of done. And what I messaged Dustin was last night was more like the watchability aspect of things was what I was kind of thinking about. But Dustin's also trying to crown a true champion. So you've got two simultaneous things that you're trying to kind of like guide along at the same time. And they're both insanely difficult to do this day and age because we're so far from what demo derby used to be. It's almost like we're back to the grassroots of it, trying to get it back there, but it's really, really hard to do these days.
Yeah, and I think these conversations, though, will help us further. I mentioned this earlier, the lack of a media, I think, has really held us back because whether it's what other promoters are doing or attempting to do or what we're doing, there needs to be some form of critique there. And I'm talking about professional criticism. I'm not talking about making a Facebook post, mother effing every promoter for doing this and doing that. Because in reality, like you don't see me getting on there much because, we're going to have 2 big shows this year. And I guarantee you not everybody's going to be happy because of them. All right. But if you critique us in a way that makes us better, I'm all for it. If you get on there and, mother F us to death over something that, really isn't a debate, it's not good for the sport. Okay.
Yeah. Doesn't do what any good.
No. And we're missing that media. So we need that because we need these conversations to happen. All right. So we can further the sport. As soon as you messaged me that stuff, I was like, hey, let's get on here and let's talk about it. I'm encouraging someone to get on here and disagree with the way we're doing it. Because if there's a better way, we'll attempt the better way. We just think that we have the best way at this point in time, based on the factors that I presented earlier, as far as, we need invested interest, we need entertainment, we need fast-paced, action-packed, and we need to crown a champion, and we think that we cover all those. I mean, we really thought through this format for years before we presented it and brought it to the public. I can tell you this year, Jarrod, our guys, I know we're paying $25,000 to win, which is a huge, prize. I mean, it's the biggest prize, single prize in demolition derby out there. And I understand that some of these drivers are coming for that prize. Okay. But they're also coming because they have to beat 2 cars and they're in a feature to win $25,000. Now, listen, I have arguably said that this may be the hardest show to win that's ever happened out there. And the reason being is because you actually have to beat cars. I tell you what, if we went back and watched just the shows of this year, how many of the people that are in the top 5 or the winners actually crippled any car out there, took a kill shot on any car? I can tell you that there's going to be some shows where it's like, wow, the winner of that show actually never beat anybody besides second place.
They got lucky.
Well, I wouldn't call it lucky. I'd say they just played the game the way we're asking the guys to play the game. The problem with that is there's no entertainment there. There's nothing to sell, gentlemen. It's a product that, unless you're in this niche sport, you don't enjoy it. Okay, you're not going to be intrigued by it. And hell, even people in the niche sport, I'm not entertained by something that lasts 3 hours and playing bumper cars. Like it's if it doesn't sell to us, who's it going to sell to?
Right. Well, my point was, in the TNN shows, all those drivers were selected by promoters. So, for instance, like I said before, Ted Cooper, I grew up watching the man. Sonny Hall, who used to own USA up here, was contacted by whoever the promoters were out there. I'm not sure. I probably should know, but I don't. And they said, who's your best guy? Well, they selected Ted Cooper, and other promoters sent basically their best drivers. Well, my problem with how those shows were is that they ran 2-minute heats and they picked like the most aggressive people. So in all reality, it was the loudest motor. So that's not really necessarily winning. And then they had a 40-minute cut and dry feature, and then they picked the winner again, which doesn't necessarily, you know what I mean? You had to be running at the end, but you also had to put on a good show. But that doesn't always mean that you're the, I'm not sure. You know what I mean?
So to me, that kind of what they're doing there is kind of making a I want to use this term loosely, a mockery of our sport. Okay. I want to use it loosely because that would be like football saying, well, the hardest hit this half, that's who wins the half. That's who gets 7 points. No. There's so much more skill involved in this game and talent than whoever hits the hardest. Okay. You could have just a borderline idiot to go out there and just kill people, and all of a sudden you get points. No. I want to see the quarterback under pressure, under duress. Okay. Be able to make the check down, or be able to the receiver be able to break the tackle or make the cut. Okay. That takes, that enables or make the catch, right? That makes their team, get a first down or get into scoring range or something like that. And that's what the format does, is it allows us to display that type of talent within the derby world, rather than just saying 2 minutes aggressive hit. Well, I can tell you, I'm not really entertained by somebody that just goes out and hits somebody.
They were 2-minute entire heats. The whole heat was over in 2 minutes. It was a 2-minute shootout, and then it was a commercial, and then 2-minute shootout, commercial, 2-minute shootout. And then whoever put on the best show during the heat, it made great action, but it's also really hard to crown a true champ. If in the 90s, if you took a hard shot to the rear wheel and broke an axle, your night was over because you can't put on a good show.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And a lot of people did. If you break a wheel off, you can be the best driver in the world, take a hard shot because everybody's out there running around like maniacs. If you take a hard shot to the wheel, you can't move, you get shoved up on the blocks, your whole weekend's over.
Yeah, see, and we want to organize the sport. We want to create and showcase our talented drivers based on their skill and ability to take drivers out.
So there's like this really, really super fine line of watchability without sacrificing the driver's abilities. So, in the format is basically, can you beat these other two drivers? We're not worried about if you've got 7 friends on the track and there's 10 cars, because your other buddies might be in different heats against different people. It breaks up the dynamic. And having numbers there really, if you draw 3 of your buddies, you're going to be a while not hitting them because you're only taking one,
Well, we found that the longest heat that we've had it's been 2 shows, okay, that we've ran the format is 22 minutes long. The longest heat. So to me, I can sit there and watch 22 minutes worth of entertainment.
Yeah.
What I can't watch is an hour and a half, okay, and then come back for a feature that's lasting 3 hours. It's just not entertaining to me. We're missing so much of the sell. You talked about the wrestling guys being involved in the TNN days, but the sell, that, what the wrestling guys understood? They understood entertainment. Okay.
Yes.
And what our guys in our sport have to understand is they have to understand entertainment. There's a sell piece to this. And our sell piece to this is you're drawn right before you pull on the track. So the hype, the anticipation. If you talk to our drivers last year, they've never been in an event like they were last year in which they didn't know who they were running against or when they were running. So the pee breaks, the feeling like you got to use the restroom 25 times, the I'm going to puke feeling, that like some of those drivers experienced that like 7, 8 times. And next year they're going to experience it 15, 20 times. You know, the guys at the end, they're just not going to know. So that hype, that anticipation, that looking on the list saying, oh man, I mean, just think about the hypothetical format we put out last weekend. Okay. You got Sean Allen, Trace Braun, and Pete Hansen. I'm telling you right now, if it gets down to there's 9 drivers left or 12 drivers left, and those 3 are still a possibility, okay, of drawing each other, the buzz that's going to be the buzz. Oh man, this is actually going to happen, because we had people comment on our post and message me and whatnot and said, that's worth the price of entertainment. That's worth $100 right there. You give me those 3 guys on the track, I'm paying you $100. And think about this, man. That is kind of a UFC mentality, is what we're doing. We're hyping it up. We're not sure what type of entertainment we're going to provide. Okay. When everybody, the chips are in the ring, everybody, the cars are, you know, in the squared circle, whatever you want to call it. Okay. They're in there. We're not sure, like, if you could break 2 wheels off right away, somebody could smoke a transmission, anything could happen. But it's the anticipation, it's the hype, it's the UFC type entertainment or selling points, rather than saying, all right, well, we got to have this action, this is what's going to happen. No. The part of the drama, part of the entertainment is the build up to that. Again, you're getting with the format.
Yes. You're getting good action, and you're also getting the driver ability. You're not just throwing one completely out the window saying, hey, sorry, we got to put a commercial on. You know, your heat's over. You got a great car, but we're taking this guy. So you sit there and go, oh, okay, you know, guys from here, Kansas, 14-hour drive. They went all the way down there for 2 minutes.
Exactly.
I mean, I'd do that probably once and then never do it again.
There
was other things that happened on those shows as well, but I really do feel like it probably wouldn't have lasted anyways, just simply because I don't think a lot of the drivers there were given a fair cut. And maybe they were. You know, I go back and watch those, and there's a lot of drivers running them that are running today. You can get them on your podcast and ask their opinion as well. But just for me, looking from the outside in, it's like, I don't know. That's a long way to go to possibly get picked and possibly not get picked. I'd much rather have a chance at, you know, beating just 2 other guys, where if Pete Hansen and Trace Braun and
Sean
Allen, Corey Roman, whoever else was in my heat, I'm relieved I've only got to run against 2 of them. It's like, oh, maybe I can get lucky. Maybe not.
And then also you get the underdog, right? You get let's say if you go back 25 years, okay, before Toby won Dent. Well, Toby was just a young cat, okay, just getting into the sport, didn't necessarily have the respect or the attention of the Derby world at that point, because he hasn't earned it at that point. But if you get knocked off or beat by Toby Hiley 25 years ago in the format, you're going to say, well, yeah, I didn't know who that kid was at that time, but he turned out to be one of the best ever, you know, and that gives those guys a chance. The guys like me that nobody knows, that I don't know if that guy can drive, you know, that type of stuff. It gives those guys a chance to make a statement and say, hey, I'm here. And the statement is based on your talent and your ability to take out cars, which is our whole sport. We're giving those guys that opportunity.
And it's not a team show. I messaged Dustin and I suggested that. I said, because I was coming from the watchability part of it. The way that his format is you've got 3 cars and 3 cars and 3 cars and 3. You got like little pools of tadpoles in a pond going at it. And I said, well, what if you did like a 2 versus 2 or like a 3 versus 3, like 3 red cars versus 3 yellow cars, you know, they have to go at it. And then you've got 3 black cars versus 3 green cars, and they're going at it. And then it's really like you countered me so well. I lost my train of thought on it. I was like, I'm not really prepared to have that discussion, but it's really hard. It takes away from what if you draw a good team? What if you draw Pete Hansen and Trace Braun and this other guy drew, not as good at guys? I mean, you guys are going to steamroll those guys easily. Your format is 1 versus 1 versus 1. So the individual driver gets to show his talents without the team. And that was the point that you made. And that's why I kind of was like, yeah, you're right. But I was coming from the watchability part of it. You know what I mean? So it would be like to where the whole track is going at it instead of having these separate deals going on. But at the same time, it does take away from driver ability if you give the guy 2 more cars that may or may not be way better or way worse. And then he either gets screwed over really bad or gets insanely lucky because he drew really good cars on his team.
Yeah, so part of this is you've got to appeal to the drivers too. You can't forget your audience of the drivers, right? And those are your customers, so to speak. Okay, right. The 350 drivers that are signed up for our show, they're our customers. So you can't, and then also the fans coming are our customers too. So, but you can't forget about either one of them. In our format, we're saying, hey man, we don't want to be involved in anything that happens on the track. Okay. We're just going to put you in the arena, all right, and it's going to be based on what your ability and how well you drive in that given time frame, okay? And I think when we do that for our drivers, and I think we've seen with the turnout the second year, is that's what they want. All they want is a chance, and we're giving them a chance. They don't want a draw to be drawn with 2 we always call them down here cheese dicks, okay? And in Ohio, they don't want 2 cheese dicks. They don't want the subjectivity of being drawn and not knowing and being able to, or having to count on somebody else to do their job. They want it to be on them, and I either was the best that day or I wasn't, and that's what it comes down to.
Right. Yeah. And again, to reiterate on the 1 versus 1 versus 1, I mean, you're taking teaming completely out of it. So if you look at the drivers list and it's just loaded, I mean, I would get a big wave of relief if I realized I only had to run against 2 of the drivers to try to make the feature instead of, oh geez, I might draw, 10 big name top tier drivers in my heat. I've got no chance. Well, under your format, it really doesn't matter. They still have to beat me. Just, basically 1-on-1 pretty much,
Another thing that people don't really talk about with the format is it allows us to not only run 15 cars in the heat, 12 cars in the heat, 9 cars. We could run 10, we could run 8, we could run 3 as we did last year and still provide the same entertainment. Last year at the King of Ohio, I wouldn't say it was I don't want to say it was a bust. It was disappointing that we didn't get more cars than what we got. Okay. But what it made us do is it made us adapt to the situation, and it made us understand a little bit more of what we created and how we can create entertainment out of it and have value to entertain people. Because people that watch those heats, especially in the King class, they were still entertained. And we only had 3 cars on the track at that time. And it was still very entertaining, and people felt like they got their money's worth. So I really think it kind of opened up a door for us, like, wow, guys, I think we might have a little more pliability here than what we thought with the format.
Yeah, if you've got good action, I don't think it matters how many cars are on the track. I really don't. And I'll also never get bored watching it. So, like, for example, I went out to Blizzard Bash for the first time this year. And compared to other shows that would last 4 days, I'd be so burned out by day 2. I'd be like, man, I'm ready to go home. I'm derbied out after a couple days.
Yep.
Blizzard Bash, ooh, I could have sat and watched that show for a week straight because it was good action. It was very good action. Everybody out there just ripping, junk being made. pull those guys off, and there's only 8 cars on the track. So we're talking a couple of minutes in between heats. It's not like it's a half hour. There's not 30 cars out there. Here they come. Turn them up.
It makes you wonder, like that show. I went out there last year too. Okay. And I felt like it was a really good show. I felt like the entertainment, like you're saying, was there, but it makes you wonder why shows back home ran by the same promoter aren't ran as efficiently. Like, where's the efficiency at Bash? Like it's not even, it's 2 different planets.
It's the format of it.
I'm talking about getting cars on and off the track. One of the biggest things I was impressed by is the guys getting bumpers and debris off the track. Did you catch that? How quickly they did that?
I'll tell you this. I was told by a driver when he ran his heat, and when he sees this podcast, he'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and you'll probably find out who it is. He said when the heat before his started, he was walking back to his car. By the time he got to his car and got it started up, they were pulling out to go on the track.
Yeah.
The heat run, and they had cleared the track in that time it took him to walk from the stands to the shed, started his car, and he was bringing it out on the track already. And he didn't have no heat in his motor.
I have no problem
a little bit because the car didn't get a chance to warm up.
I have no problem. Yeah, absolutely. I have no problem giving credit where credit's due, and credit's due in how well they cleaned that track, how they kept the pace going. And I'm not talking about the driver pace. I'm just talking about cleaning the track, getting all the shit off the track. They only got 1 entrance in and out. Okay. And it was extremely, extremely quick. That's something that can sell. But my question is, like, where is that back here?
Well, the other thing too that I just have to, I gloat about that show so much, because if you've never been to Blizzard Bash, you don't understand that when the flag drops, it's deafening. It's like they shot 50 cannons all at once, and you're just sitting there like, oh my God. I mean, you think monster trucks are loud, go to Blizzard Bash. That show is so just, it's crazy. It's like the only thing comparable I've ever seen is Joker's Wire Class, where you're watching 1 hit and you're missing 3 on this side of the track. You're looking over here, there's 4 hits going on over here. And these guys are standing their cars up 4 feet in the front with 1 hit. That's all Blizzard Bash is for 4 days long.
Yeah, you can, you're going to be missing. You can't possibly see all the action that's going on the track.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that's the type of action that will sell, I feel. But it's hard to get because a lot of drivers aren't necessarily going to go out there balls to the wall the whole time, unless their car is like really, really built, or there's like a really, really big Mad Dog incentive. Unless you break it down and you basically have to close the deal out from the start without it being a team show. So what your shows, I mean, your shows kind of combine them. It's like, you got to use the juice to beat these guys, but at the same time, your car is also built enough to take it, but you don't have to worry about 3 other guys getting the cars built into the track to be able to run. So you've only got to build 1 car. You only have to run against 2 of them. And, your car is not going to be junk after 4 hits because your rules are actually, I've read your rules. I like them.
That's the sales pitch right there, Jarrod. I mean, it's the best of both worlds. And I'm not sitting here saying that this is the end all be all, but man, I think we're close. I really, really do. And the caliber of drivers that are supporting us this year, that are running for that 25,000, just across the board, is insane. And I think win or lose, these drivers are going to walk away from King of Ohio knowing they got beat, okay, or they beat somebody. I mean, think about this, man. I'm going to throw a couple scenarios out there. You beat a Trace Braun a Sean Allen or a Pete Hansen, okay, let's say take one of those two out or one of those guys out and put you in there. You beat them, instant credibility, okay, instant fame, instant you're on the map of everybody out there. And it doesn't matter if you win 25,000 or not, okay? You're the man. And people may not even remember who won the 25,000, but you know what they will remember? Jarrod Blades whooping somebody's ass, okay, out on the track in the heat.
I already kind of tend to drive that way myself anyways. Your format is probably perfect for me the way I drive, because I'm kind of the guy that if the feature runs like an hour and a half, I run like 50 minutes of it and then watch the rest because my car's junked. Somebody made me mad early on. So I basically go full format mode on somebody and then, well, they're done and my car's jumped. So I guess we'll find out who wins and load her up.
Yeah,
But
you do gotta save your car a little bit though too. I mean, I think the nose to nose shots aren't gonna be, they're not gonna be a big thing in the heats for sure, because you don't want to hurt that car too bad. So you're gonna see a lot of that driving skill, that calculation of just catching guys at the right time and whatnot, beating on those wheels. I think is all entertaining.
the other thing I personally, we haven't actually discussed this, but like one of the things that I like to see as a driver and as a fan is a lot of variety. So, you know, like the 80 and newer shows, I'm not knocking promoters that have them, but to me, they're not as fun to watch as like, say, an imp and a suicide and a caddy and a wagon all going at it. Or, you know, a New Yorker versus an Impala versus this versus that. I feel this day and age, there really shouldn't be, like with everything that people know to do and for the prize money that is available, it's not like any car has enough of an edge to necessarily either, you know, let the drivers do more to other cars to counter that, or just plain like we know what happens to them, you know. And you allow Imperials, no?
Yeah, we were the first ones to bring Imperials back down here. And
Yep.
For what exactly you're saying, like, I don't understand why you can't write a rule set to make them all pretty equal.
With everything that goes on these days, I don't feel that any car should necessarily be not allowed. If you're allowed to build the other cars up to them, you know, like I don't think a protector necessarily helps an imp as much. So, you know, if you're allowed to do all this to a Ford, it's kind of dumb to outlaw Imperials when we know that they bend where they bend. And you guys, again, were, you know, let them in. You know, those things. I've ran imps and I got jumped by 03s. Like 2 minutes in, I had a broken axle and my rear quarter was missing. That's the sheet metal of an imp for you. I didn't even get to use the frame on it because I was sideways against the blocks with 3 Fords up, you know, inside of it pretty much. Front wheel lean, rear wheel broke immediately. And I was like, wow, all right. I didn't win this show because I had an Imperial. I actually lost this show because I had an Imperial. It was a magnet.
Yeah, I think people just didn't take the time to like figure out like, and I'm not saying our rules are perfect and all the cars are equal, but what I can tell you is that if you're an imp guy, if you're a wagon guy, if you're a Ford guy, you can choose your weapon, you can feel comfortable building it, and you can run it how you want to run it. Okay. It all depends on how you want to run that heat. Last year we saw the imps, they're just like big swinging hammers. They're just, if they hit you, and Corey Roman is a perfect example. I mean, the ass end of his car is gone in the heat because of an imp, you know, and he just didn't let him hit him that often. They got a couple good shots. He just never stopped moving in the Ford, and that was his game. And that's the way he wanted to drive. And we feel like we're allowing our drivers to do that.
Yeah. So the next level of just seeing the variety on the track I like to watch is, did this guy build the car the right way, and can he drive the car? So if you're in an 03 or a Ford against an Imp, and I see that Ford go the other end of the track, I'm like, all right, you're gonna be feeling this one, because you're gonna watch that Imp just chase it, and boom, that's how an Imp should be driven.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're in the Ford, you better stay next to that Imp, or he's gonna get you. And I watch and see, okay, does this guy know how to drive a Ford against an Imp, or does this guy, can this guy drive a Cad? Can this, or was it just one of these guys that went out and bought one because he heard they were good? You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
didn't really know. I look at it and it's like, ooh, I'm a caddy guy. Probably not going to work out the best. Or, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. Can he drive it? Or did he just get some tips from a caddy guy or something? You got to be able to drive those cars. Same thing with a Ford. There's a science to driving every car. And I like to watch, can these drivers drive these cars? Can they build these cars? And if something happens, what do they do about it? In the format, you get to watch, can they build them? Can they drive them? And can they seal the deal? Can they actually beat an Imp? Because they have to. Can they beat a wagon and a Ford? Can a wagon beat an Imp? Can a wagon beat a Ford? You'd be surprised. I mean, I've seen station wagons. They're probably the best car to have across the board. I've seen them get 20th place out of 23 cars for whatever reason. And I've seen them win, countless times. Same thing with Fords. I ran a show, actually. I don't know if I should name it or not, but I won't, because I don't want the other drivers, if they see this. But it was half old iron, half Fords. I think there was 2 wagons, 2 caddies, handful of Impalas, Buicks, whatever, and then the rest was Fords. There's probably 23 cars, 1 heat deal, and 98 to 02 won it because he drove. The driver knew what he was doing when he built the car and when he drove it.
What you're saying here, and what you keep repeating, is driving ability, okay, and able to build the car.
Yep.
What else would you want as a Derby driver to compete in the sport that those two be the highlights of of what we're going to display? What else do you want? If you're the best driver and the best builder, okay, come out and showcase it. We have the platform for you, okay, to showcase it on, and come prove that you're the best.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you this. I mean, if I had a Ford and I drew 2 wagons, my gut would probably sink a little bit. But I'd give them a run for their money. I know what not to do, I mean, I'll have my motor in there. They'll have to catch me, that's for sure.
And we've never seen those storylines play out. There are so many storylines to play out that weekend. I mean, just I don't want to, keep going back to this, but this last week's draw, Sean Allen, Allen's, for those of you that don't know who they are, the 2 boys, which would be Sean's boy, would be Brady and Devin, have probably won more derbies than any 2 combined people across the United States probably the last 5 years. And they run a lot of county fairs, and they run every weekend, and they win all the time. Okay. Well, Ryan and Sean are the dad and uncle. Okay. And they kind of dominated their area for a long, long time, which would be Lima, Ohio area where we're having the show. And then you got Trace Braun. Basically, resume speaks for himself. I mean, he's won Bash for Cash twice. Only a handful of people to do that. And most of those names, last names end with Braun. Okay.
I was going to say, the other guys that have done it are also named Braun.
Now, there's some other people that have done it, I think. Tosco won. with his win last year. He was actually the first person to ever win the 80s kicker class, and then the turn back the clock, that's a pretty neat accomplishment. And that's why we need media for that too. Like, nobody even knows that stuff. Like, why are we not talking about that? Tosco, that should have been a hot topic for quite a while. That's a hell of an accomplishment.
Yeah.
But getting back to what I was saying is, you got Trace, resume obviously speaks for itself. Then you got Pete. Okay, Pete's coming from PA. PA has long been they've long thought that they wanted to be recognized as the quality of builders of Ohio, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because they've certainly proved it. Okay, they don't, for some reason PA hasn't adopted those type of rules widely like Ohio has, so those guys haven't had that opportunity. So they've came over here a lot, and a lot of times they were outnumbered coming over here. So
for sure.
So now they're handicapped. So they've wanted to prove that for a long time. But you got Pete, Keystone National twice, I believe. Then you got him winning Vegas. Blizzard Bash, he didn't win Blizzard Bash, I don't believe, but they put on that like super iconic heat.
Him and Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, so his resume speaks for itself. Who you got there?
I'll tell you this. I don't think I've ever seen Pete lose. Maybe at Bash one time, but every other show I've ever heard of him running, he's won. But I've never really seen Trace Brown lose either, maybe once or twice. Allen, I'm not as sure about. I'm just from a different area. I'm from up here. But again, I mean, if he plays his cards right, and that's what I'm saying. I'll tell you this. A very, very good builder told me one time. I said, what do you think we should bring to this show if we ran? He said, you bring what you know. I said, okay. He said, no matter what the rules are, you bring what you know. All right. So if he brings what he knows and drives how he knows how to drive, you start getting out of your element, you handicap yourself. I'm a caddy guy. If I show up in a 98-02, all my precise calculations I might have in a caddy are completely out the window now, because I haven't ran as many Fords. And they might know that a really bad side shot might do something to my frame that I'm not aware of. And then everything goes downhill really fast from there. In the caddy, I know exactly what's going on. So even if the rules don't favor a caddy, I'm probably better in one, because I know them a lot better than I would a Ford. So back to what I'm saying. I mean, anybody can have an off day, and let's say Brown breaks the wheel off and Pete roasts the trans. Who knows? There you go.
Well, you're talking about people having an off day, and that's something that I think we're trying to get these drivers to accept, and they have accepted, is that, listen, you may have an off day, okay? And, there is no consi. All right. And there is no consi for the simple fact of, Jarrod, if you beat me in the heat, you beat me. You shouldn't have to see me in the feature when I got 5 of my buddies. And now I have a vendetta against you. Okay. Sure. Now you're not winning the show, and you already beat me. There's no reason you should have to beat me twice. Okay. So there is no consi. So that live another day, or fight another day is a thing at our show. And we started the King of Indiana this year. I don't know if you pretty much stay up on our stuff, so I'm sure you've seen that. But for that sole reason is we wanted to give these drivers another chance. If Ohio's not their day, King of Ohio, it's just not their day, something happens, whatever, they'll have another chance about a month later to run at the King of Indiana, all right, for $10,000 to win. It's still a great paying show, okay? And they get another opportunity. That's also something that we want to create, is we want to create that circuit in which these guys can run these cars. If you get beat in the heat, more than likely your car's probably not junk. More than likely you got the wheels beat off of it. So replace the suspension, put some wheels back on it, and go run it again in 2 weeks. It's almost like a dirt track type of thing.
Yeah.
And we're allowing you to build these cars hard enough where you're going to be able to do that. And if we give you big money to run for every month or every couple weeks, we really think we can create that type of circuit that brings these caliber of drivers in, that draws the fans and creates the support that we're going to need.
The other thing too, we haven't touched on yet that is very, very, very important to crowning a true champion is that you have to qualify to run the King of Ohio. I just wanted to point that out, that you're always posting, this driver, qualified for the King, I think that's very important, that you don't just let anybody in who just gets to cherry pick. Okay, I'm going to have, all these guys coming, even with the format, even with, everything else, you still have to win a show or however you guys do that to even be able to run for the big pot.
So what we've changed that just a little bit, and I want to make sure I address that this year. With the qualifying only system, we felt like it was the best way, all right, to crown a true champion. The problem with that is when you're the new kid on the block, not everybody wants to support you, okay? A lot of people are hesitant to run for you, don't necessarily like the format or this or that. So we found that, like, our shows, there was a lot of people out there that wanted to support us, but we weren't allowing them to because we were only giving opportunities to the people that qualified. So what we did this year is we kind of switched it or changed it up a little bit, is we said we're going to open entries up for anyone that qualified, and we provide a shirt for them, a real nice Jegs t-shirt. It says earn not given on the back, pretty neat. And they get an opportunity to sign up first. If the classes fill with those qualifiers, they're not open to the public. But if they don't fill within that time frame, we do open them up to anyone. Okay. And the reason being is because, you want a full show. You want people to be able to support you. And we haven't quite captured the audience of the Derby world at this point. We understand that just because we're a little bit of the new guy on the block type stuff. So that allows us to have a full show, provide entertainment. And this year, we got the King class full. Pro stock is 3/4 of the way full. Front wheel drive stock is like a handful of cars from being full. The rear wheel drive stock is 75, 80% full. Trucks they're lacking a little bit. The youth front wheel drive is doing pretty good. Rear wheel drive is all right, but we expect that to pick up after Bash, and they have theirs, to get some leftovers. And then the Queen class, could need some help, but again, that's a stock build. I think there will be some people that jump on later on. But a lot of our classes are doing really well because of that. That qualifying deal, though, is something we really want to stick to. We've got to get more people to adopt it, and understand what that means.
I'm really glad that you've kept me on this long, and I want to point something else out. When I was at Prequel to the King, I was in the pits with a driver, and I saw how you treated him rules wise, and I thought to me that, okay, this is a promoter who gets it. Instead of putting the guy on the trailer, you said, listen, do this for me and jump up a class. And I thought to myself, I says, when you're doing that much to a car, I don't honestly care as much what the next guy does because my car's built. I'd rather see somebody get treated fairly than, oh, he's got an extra 2 inches plate here, or, oh, he's got 12 door plates instead of 10, nitpicky stuff. I felt that you treated that driver very fairly, And I don't think that gets talked about enough in the Derby world. I really don't. That is the one thing that I really, really praise the promoters up here, specifically Todd Sorensen's son, Logan. He inspects for TNT. And when you treat drivers fairly, when you work with them, for example, the show in Cadillac last year had 23 cars in limited weld. And we call it like full cradle, you know, full protectors, full cage. That's what we call limited weld up here. They had cars from, I want to say, at least 3 or 4 different promoters, pre-run cars, like say Spring X, Wicked, Turkey Derby, you know, stuff like that, all coming in. And the way that they handled every driver was just very, very, very professional. And even if the car wasn't exactly what the rule said, they said, okay, do this for me, you'll be good. I think there was 2 fresh cars at that show, and not a single car got put on the trailer. I don't feel like it's talked about enough. I feel a lot of drivers, when they go to a show, if they're not treated fairly, or if they're almost attacked for pushing certain rules, we're all builders. We're all lawyers in our head. So if I see a rule that says 14-inch bumper plate, let's take this for example, Derby Icons last year, but it doesn't say it has to touch the bumper. I don't want to be yelled at when I come to your show and it's slid back 6 inches. I want to have a discussion. Maybe I asked you beforehand, maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't ask you because maybe you'll say no. If I show up with it, we'll have the conversation then. But it doesn't say it in your rules. For example, and this is an own thing. I'm not giving away any secrets. I don't want to be attacked by the inspector. I want to be treated fairly. I want to be talked to like an adult. And that's exactly how you handled that situation. And if I could say something else besides the format works pretty well and it gets the most out of drivers and builders, is that you guys treat drivers really well as well. And that probably means more than the format does or the payout. If you treat drivers well, you'll probably have more drivers show up at a 1,000 to win show than a 25,000 to win show when you treat drivers like dirt. And if you look around, like right now, there are certain promoters that they could put on a 50,000 to win show and won't have any cars at it because they've lost the respect of the drivers. And I feel right now that you're on your way up with that just because based on what I've seen. Now, I feel that the more drivers see that, the more respect you'll get as a promoter, the better you treat people. And I think that, you know, you guys are already doing a pretty good job at that.
Well, I appreciate that. You didn't have to say all that, and that wasn't planned or anything. So
No, I did need to say that because I don't feel it gets talked about enough. I really don't. You know, anytime I get asked by promoters, most of it is being treated well. You know, and you guys do. That's another big thing on your guys' resume is that you guys treat drivers very fairly. And that enough right there is enough to get somebody to build a car for you and say, you know what? I'm gonna do my thing and I'm gonna be treated good when I get there.
well, it goes back to answering messages and things like that. I don't miss many messages. If I haven't answered you, it's because something drastic is happening.
Yep.
We pride ourselves on that because, you know, you guys are our customers, the drivers are our customers, we are running a business. And I've been in a situation, I've been in situations where promoters, I've showed up to build a car for a specific promoter in Ohio, a very large promoter, okay, and was not treated. This was, you know, 6-7 years ago now, in which I had like every penny of my money into that car to support them. And, you know, basically you roll into inspection and you're told load that piece of shit up. And it's like, I literally just spent every dollar I had to support you, and that's the way you support, that's the way you're going to treat me. Like it just completely rubs you the wrong way. It's like,
Yeah,
wait a
never again. Never
No,
again.
never again. And there's a lot of drivers that are running for us now because of that specific reason. And listen, you said it was me several times in that. It's not just me. I got to tell you, we went out and we hired, and the people that we have working for us understand exactly what you're saying. They understand the exact expectations of drivers because they are all drivers. They understand how people want to be treated, need to be treated. And honestly, it's those guys that make all this happen because they have the most interaction with drivers. They're the ones inspecting the cars, flagging the wall, all of that stuff. It really is about your crew, and that is the most important piece of this. Our crew, and I've said this several times, our crew, I guarantee you, is the only crew that meets bi-weekly in the United States, okay, via Zoom, and damn near every single person is there every time. We got almost 30 people that every other Sunday night we meet for at least an hour, and usually they go over. That, and you're talking, think of who's on our crew. We got Toby Hiley, we got Lloyd and Jordan Kirkham, we've got Joel Freiberger, we got Mike Decker. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Like very well-known guys that are willing to put in this effort.
Guys are on the wall because I wouldn't want to run against them.
Yeah, exactly. Trust me, some of those guys really want to run the show too. But we really need these guys. I don't want to say step out of their comfort zone because they're really good at what they do, inspecting and treating drivers right. But we need them to lead this. A couple other guys we got: Jeremy Val, Jordan Rutherford. I mean, just Jonathan Heilman. Just awesome, unbelievable guys that you'll sit down, have a beer with, guys that will shake your hand, say, hey man, you got one over on me, or man, that's a great idea. They're not big ego guys. They treat you how you want to be treated.
Yeah, I mean, there are high paying shows I could go run. Not far from me is like 6 hours away, right? Because all the shows around me are like 2-3 hours away, just based on where I'm at. But then I don't go run because I just know the minute I pull in, it's all drama. It's all, oh, here comes, Blades, and he's probably got something somewhere. And it's like, listen, I've seen you run cars and you've got more done than me, or you took rules way above and beyond what I ever would have. And Here you are jumping on me for running a factory shock. Anyway, it's like, that's what it says. Factory shock. It's factory shock. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Your rule doesn't say factory for that car. It says factory shock. It's factory shock. For example,
there's a fine line.
It doesn't say it has to be a factory bumper,
There's a fine line that, on the promoting side of this, in which you've got to keep all that under wraps. We don't necessarily have a true sanctioning body, although we're trying to establish that with what we're doing, and having our shows, a sanctioning body where this is how things are going to function. This is how things are going to work under us and under our umbrella. But while we establish that with all these different promoters, calling things different and this and that, it's a fine line. So our guys, they are going to draw a line and how far you can read into those rules. And it is in the driver's best interest to contact our inspectors and find out where those lines are, because these guys are the best at looking into rules, but they know there's a line. Okay. And they're going to let you know where that line is. And it's very important to have some close communication. The last thing we want for you and for us supporting us is for you to come, for our entertainment, our customer to come to our show and not be able to run. That's terrible.
All I ask as a driver is, if I find a loophole and you say I can't do it, then change the rule for next year. If you refuse to change that rule, I'm going to get angry, because you might as well throw that whole rule sheet out if you don't change that rule. Because now none of your rules don't mean anything.
Well, you also can't make a rule sheet 35 pages long either. So just think about that, because we've spent weeks, months on our rules, and we still find like, oh, well, this is kind of up for interpretation here. We send out rule clarifications and this and that. Well, in all reality, without writing a 50-page, book, it's really hard to detail exactly how you need to build these cars.
Well, if the rule says any bumper shock, and I say, hey, can I run a Chrysler shock? You say, no, it has to be factory to that car. That's not going to add 10 pages to your rules. All it needs to say is one little clause in there. And, 99% of the time, the rest of the rule book just gets left alone. You know what I mean? It's not going to be like an extensive, I need, 5 pages defining what a bumper shock is. I don't think it's going to be that drastic. There are rule sheets out there that are almost that long to begin with. But at the same time, I mean, we've got common sense too. But if I can get, an advantage on something that I just plain found and said, hey, you've got a big loophole here. And you say, oh, well, this is what I want. And I look at that rule sheet next year and it doesn't change. It's like, man, if it doesn't say how many door plates we can have, and I weld my doors solid, and I get there and you say, oh, you're only allowed 6 door plates. Your rules need to say that.
I agree.
Not going to add pages and pages to your rules to put that little thing in there, 6 door plates, That's kind of where I'm coming from. Unless you've got like 5 pages of rules per every car that's allowed, I don't think you'll ever wind up at 30 or 40 pages worth of rules. But I'm talking like obvious stuff. Like if it doesn't say we can't run 8 lug rear ends and you only want to have 5 lug rear ends, then it needs to be in the rules, because you know what I mean? Like stuff like that. That's not necessarily going to add a whole bunch to it, but just as a driver, it's one of my peeves.
I think what's hindered our ability to evolve in that area is there's not many promoters out here that are doing this full time. The lack of organization and the lack of an actual full-time job, people necessarily only have so much time to look into these rules and write these rules, and things like that are missed. And hopefully, we did our due diligence, and put our time in to limit or answer most of those questions with our rules. But I'm telling you, it's a difficult task to do. And the progression of the sport has been hindered by people not being able to do this full time.
So let me go back to my watchability point on like the NFL and the NBA and every sport you watch on TV is that way for a reason. They want it to look a certain way and they want it to be marketable. So, why aren't there 10 downs in football? Why are there only 4? You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that somebody decided at some point and said, there's going to be 4. And now they're coming out with illegal ways to tackle people that if you watch football from the 80s, it's almost barbaric. You're watching people get sent to the hospital every quarter almost. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, there's definitely that part of it. But there's also too much to where you're taking away from the sport. You're actually making the build too hard. And right now, I feel right now that we're in the golden age of demolition derby. Right now we are. Because if you want to wire the doors shut on a car, move the battery, knock the windows out, there's a class for you. If you want to put your 350 Chevy into a Crown Vic and change the bumpers and put a 4-point cage in, there's a class for you. If you want to build a living snot out of a car, full protectors, bumpers, spindles, everything, there's a class for you. There's like breaks in between the classes to where, like to say, the motor swap rules will be more extensive because those cars have to bend because they're not, mod cars. And the mod car rules are more wide open because they're just plain built more, you know. I just looked at a set of rules from a promoter that just came out. There's like 10 rules for the mod class. That's it. Because they don't care, because it's a mod class, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But their motor swap class is extensive rules because we're not going to allow a plate to the A-arm in the motor swap class. So they've got more rules. And then the wire class is more back to 10 rules. No welding. Street legal tire. Doors may be wired shut in 4 spots. What else is there? Must be stripped. Battery must be moved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think what's neat about that and what we've structured our events around is you can be the king of each one of those classes. If you're a guy that can't afford all the big stuff and you still want to be the best of the best at a class, we have a stock rear-wheel drive class for you. If you want to tone it up just a little bit, but still don't have all the big boy stuff, we have a pro stock class, specific to that. Now, of course, our pinnacle or the peak of our shows is the king class, and it pays the most, and it's got the biggest trophy and all that. But you can be the king of all those other classes.
You can still be part of it without having to make that big investment. And that to me is probably the most important part, because your local crowd at the county fair level anyway, your local guys that build like the gut and go classes, cars, motor swap, that's who brings all the people into the stands. And then your limited weld mod cars, they're the guys that put on the show at the end of the night. It's kind of like the old tractor pulls we used to watch. Like up here, you'd have hours and hours of just local farm guys just putting along, and that's who, everybody went up there to watch Uncle Jim pull his tractor. And then everybody stayed to watch the modified 3,000 horsepower, dual blown Hemis. And it was a half hour of that, and the show was complete. And I kind of feel that Demolition Derby has kind of gone that way. And even though there aren't, 100 cars in my class, which that doesn't bother me at all, but there were still 300 cars there. And all the people that they drew in, I get to run in front of 5,000 people. I've only got to run against 20 guys.
Yep.
And most of the time it's a one heat deal. I don't have to bring any tools, work on my car between heats. So looking at it that way, that's way better than back in the 90s where everybody ran the same class. You had people, oh, he's doing more than me. And they didn't have clear rule sheets and they didn't have inspections. You rolled in and they looked at your car on the trailer and then you went and unloaded it. You know what I mean? And guys got away with a lot more back then. Well, today we all go through the same inspection and there's no reason for drama. If you didn't build your car to a limited weld, standard, then run motor swap. If you don't like what guys are doing in motor swap, then run gut and go. You've got options today. And I really feel like I think we've got it figured out for the most part. I mean, yeah, you might have nitpicky stuff here and there, like I just mentioned, the bumper shock and all that. That's only going to happen in the limited weld class. You know what I mean?
So that brings me to something, and this is going to be a real good conversation, I can tell with you, is we identified at our shows that the pinnacle of our sport are going to be that king class driver. Okay, just like I'm
getting away from the format a little bit. I just wanted to say that while I was on. Your format's even better. I don't even have to run against 20 guys in the format. I've only got to run against 2.
Yes.
That's even better yet.
I mean, what else do you want? I almost want someone else to run this format so I can run the damn thing. I mean, I really want to run it myself. And I'm currently working on a car now. But what I was saying is we've chose to identify, and this was a very calculated decision. Okay. We've chose to identify the best of the best, the pinnacle of our sport in the king class, but also say that we need the best of the best in the grandpa's tractor pull, pulling his tractor. We need that guy to be crowned best too of his class. There's some other things that are going on out in the derby world in which, they're kind of highlighting front wheel drive guys or van guys or this or that. And they're saying that they're the best the sport has to offer. I it's not that I disagree with that. I just think that that's not what's going to bring us to the next level. Okay. If you're a front wheel drive stock car, okay, that's not what's going to sell on TV. That's not what's going to bring us to the next level. All right. Now, listen, that may be very well be maybe the future of our sport. Okay. Absolutely. And it's a very important class, and you can be the best of that class. But at some point in time, it's time to step up to a pro stock. It's time to step up to the full size. It's time to step up, into the king class and showcase your skills against that. So it's that progression. Like I attest it to baseball. Each one of these classes is almost like you got your high school, you've got your college, you've got your minor leagues. When we get to the minor leagues, that's where I would say we're at, and as far as our whole system. And you have single A, double A, triple A, rookie ball, all that stuff. Well, that's our front wheel drive class. That's our rear wheel drive class. That's our pro stock class. All that pro stock being triple A, and then you got your big leagues. Okay, and that's the way we chose to define that, rather than just saying, well, you can run any class out there that you want, and then all of a sudden you're the best of the sport. Yeah, I don't know if you're necessarily the best of the sport. I mean, there's a progression here. You can't really be the best at baseball if you're the best AAA guy. If you were the best at AAA, you would go to the big leagues in baseball, and then you would find out if you're the best on that level.
Yeah. Well, I'll run this past you too. We're not sponsored, and I can probably pick a handful of really, really good drivers who haven't been as privileged or fortunate in life to be able to afford to run the king class. You know what I mean? So if I built them a car and said, go drive it, let's just take, for example, my dad or my uncle who just don't build cars anymore. If I put them in one of my cars, I guarantee you everybody watching would learn something. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But they just would never build a mod or a limited weld car.
But what's really neat is they could build a rear-wheel drive stock car and still compete and still get the recognition and the stage. And we don't change the stage. When we hand out the trophies, you see the picture behind me, the stage doesn't change. The size of the check doesn't change. The amount on the check changes. Okay. But the size of the check, the celebration, the smiles, all the presentation, it doesn't change. So we believe that, that's awesome. That's great. We want to be able for those guys to be able to run in that class. We're just not going to say that a rear wheel drive guy or a truck guy or whatever is necessarily the king of kings. You've got to be in that premier class. And I understand it's not for everyone, but we do give that stage for everyone.
Well, let me run this past you as well. Up here, we had championships last year, and it was the TNT guys. And what they did was they ran their motor swap championship October 3rd or something. And I sat back and watched, and I thought, why aren't they having the limited weld championship that night? Well, they didn't. They had it the next weekend. It gave the motor swap guys a chance to take their cars home and plate them up and run the limited weld championship the next weekend. So kind of my point is, like, if you get a guy, especially this day and age, and I keep saying that because it's so important to the dynamic of Derby. You get a guy that knows Luminas and W bodies and Hondas like the back of his hand and can build them as good as Browns can build a wagon. But it's just a different dynamic. You know what I mean? That guy isn't going to be able to build a wagon as good as he can what he knows. So you've kind of got that going on because that's what Derby cars are to him. Because, that's what he's always ran. That's like caddies for me. I've just ran a lot of them. You've got guys that are big Honda fans or big Lumina fans or, all of that. So I don't know that it's like, I've seen some pretty good drivers in compact, wire class. Like I say, I mean, you can tell when somebody knows how to drive, and you can tell by looking at their van or whatever it is. It's like, this guy knows what he's doing, So I don't know if there's maybe a way to, give them the, some clout as well at their level. Obviously the King class would probably pay the most because those guys have the most into their cars. I'm not sure that a wire class would ever warrant a $25,000 payout, maybe in the future, but that would probably at this point just like warrant a lot of cheating and stuff like that. But, as far as being recognized and, having a like a decent payout would be, I don't feel, I feel that would be more in the realm of things. What I'm saying is you've got star drivers at every class, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And guys who have learned luminas have had to run 15 or 20 of them to get them down. Well, just because they weren't full-size cars, you know what I'm saying? Like an entry is an entry in that regard. But, also they don't have as much into their cars either. So, I mean, I'll tell you this, for all the King cars that run the King class at 25 grand to win, I don't think anybody's going to make any money.
No,
Even at 5 grand to win.
no, they're not. They're
But
probably
in the
not
wire
going to make
class-
any money, but it's sure a
wire
hell of a
class-
lot closer.
In the wire class, they're going to make about $24,500.
Well, here's the thing to kind of comment on what you were saying is we are giving those guys a stage and recognition that they deserve, and we do want to find the best of that class. But I also want to encourage these guys to move up through. Like Brennan Wisman won our rear-wheel drive stock last year. He is coming. He's in the King class. He is running the King class this year, and I like to see that. I like to see the next level, the guy take the next level.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we're able to do that with how we've got everything structured.
Yeah, I think the recognition should be the same, but I think the payout should probably step up as you go up, just simply because it costs more to build a limited weld King car than it would obviously a wire class or a bone stock car. But I think the recognition should be the same.
And let's face it, okay, that's the people of our sport. Is there 3 front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive stock cars that you can name that are going to draw the same as Pete Hansen, Trace Braun, and Sean Allen?
Well, like I say, I don't want to knock Pete Hansen or Sean Allen or Trace Braun at all, but if they came to Hart, Michigan or Cadillac, Michigan, nobody in the stands would know who they were except for the people that came with them. But you may have 50 to 100 people there to cheer on a gut and go guy because they all live.
But I'm talking on a national stage. I don't think you can compare it to like a county fair type deal. I'm talking like if those guys, a Blizzard Bash type stage, a Metal Mayhems type stage. I'm talking because we could go to county fairs in Ohio that those guys might not be known,
Well, so my viewpoint on that would be more, I would go to watch the whole show, possibly more than just a specific driver, unless you had just a staunch rivalry between the two, like turn back the clock. It'd be like, you know what I mean? But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if a fan would travel out of state to watch a driver. I'm not sure. They probably just watch the live stream. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not as versed.
Maybe you're.
I don't have any fans, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, listen, I'll tell you what I think. I don't think that that there's any 3 drivers out there in a stock class that could draw what they draw the eyes that they draw. And just like you said, the big tractor pull guys, the guys that are 4,000 horse or whatever. I mean, they are the entertainment, in our eyes. They are too. So with that said, I want to talk about this. Okay, I want to talk. So some of my buddies and I, we have these conversations. They don't necessarily want to have these conversations on a podcast, but they're really, really interesting conversations. And I felt like there needs to be a tier, almost like people need to rank drivers out there in different tiers. And we felt like it was 5 tiers that drivers need to be ranked in. Tier 1 being the best, and tier 1 being the most elite drivers in our sport.
Like a college bracket almost.
Yeah, like a college bracket, but like maybe if we went through the king class, let's see here. We go through the king class and let me.
So you would put a 1 versus a 2 versus a 3?
No. We wouldn't do anything with them. It would just be talking points. Okay.
Oh.
So like your tier 1 drivers. Who's your tier 1 drivers in Michigan? The guys that if you went anywhere in the country, you would say, I'm putting my money on these guys from Michigan.
Me. I'm kidding. Probably, I don't know, probably Dave, Ryan, Jason.
Okay. So those are tier 1 drivers. And a tier 1 driver has to have okay, you got Dave Meyer. He's won Metal Mayhem. He's won Blizzard Bash. They got to have wins of significance like that. Same thing with Songaluski. He's won Blizzard Bash. Brodzinski's won Blizzard Bash, Spring Explosion, that type of stuff. That's what we're talking about. That's what we were talking about. We thought about it would be fun. I don't necessarily think I'm the guy to do this because I'm a promoter, but if we could get other people to start having these conversations and ranking drivers according to that. Of course, they're going to be a little bit controversial and this and that. But I think it would be a fun conversation. I think it's something that we need. Lexi Droz with
Derby Inc.
Yeah, or the Derby magazine.
Yep.
She did this with promoters and drivers and this, and I think it was like voted on by fans and whatnot. But like we're not on there, and I don't care that we're not on there. What I care about is that somebody actually was bold enough to make a statement that, hey, this is the best show of the year, or these are the most popular drivers, or these are the best drivers. According to, we need that as a sport.
I believe they did that. I'm trying to think of where I saw it. There was the top 10 demolition derbies in the USA. And I remember Urban was number. It was on there, and it was the year that I ran it. And I was like, hey, I ran that show. I'm not sure what happened to it though. COVID messed a lot of things up.
Yeah.
And I would like to, contact who that was. I'm not sure if Vegas was on there. I think Blizzard Bash was number 1, which that makes sense. Urban was on there. Urban Destruction, Wicked Team Show, I believe, was on there.
I think I remember seeing this too. Who did that?
Yeah.
I don't remember who did that.
Right. I don't remember who did that either, but like I say, I feel like I remember seeing that somewhere, and it was pretty accurate. Maybe it was Klein.
Could have been. I just think that there needs to be a little bit more of that. I think there needs to be a little bit more media. I think people need to talk a little bit more. These conversations all happen. We just need certain personalities to come out and take stances, and controversial or not, just come out and take stances.
Almost like just give commentary like on the sports teams, like how they do. Like,
yes. If you don't like Triple D, tell me all the reasons why Triple D sucks. All right. Tell me why Triple D won't exist in 5 years. Tell me why Triple D is going to fall flat on its face. Tell me all those things if you don't like us. But if you like somebody else, tell us why you like them. I want to hear those things. For me personally, I want to debate you and tell you why you're wrong. Okay. And for two, I want to learn what we can do better. You may have some great points, and I'm like, shit, man, I didn't think about that. Like, that's something I didn't think about. And just like our conversation earlier, you came at me with some points. I shot right back to you, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, you're probably right. Okay.
You're right.
What if you weren't? What if I couldn't answer those points? That's a problem for what
That
I'm
that goes
doing.
back, that goes back to your customer service. That, I'm not a guy that has ran for you. I'm not a guy putting your shows on. I'm not a guy people come to your shows to watch. I'm some random guy, and I messaged you. You got right back with me and said, you know what? Let's talk about it. And that's what I was trying to say earlier, is that, 11 out of 10 promoters probably wouldn't have even answered me, let alone had me on their podcast for that reason. But you
Well,
appreciated the insight and wanted to have a conversation about it because you're trying to get better. And that's commendable.
absolutely. And I when before we came on the show, I didn't say, hey, you have to agree with every point I make. I said, hey, actually, I want you to not agree. I hope you
Right.
don't agree with a lot of points that we make so we can have this debate, because I really want to have this debate with somebody. It just turns out that we do see a lot of the same, things the same way,
I forget how like, I like your rules. I like your format. I like a lot of what you do, but I came at you with a little bit of, hey, this might work. And then you said, you know what? You're right. But this is why we already do what we do. And I was like, yes. And then after that, I was kind of like speechless because, oh yeah, I like your rules. I like to face your show. I like how you treat people. I like everything else about it. It's like, and as far as elevating the sport and, well, I keep forgetting, we got so off track. Elevating the sport and crowning a true champion.
Yep.
It's very, very hard to do. NASCAR has 30 some races a year. The NFL plays 20 games. And honestly, you may or may not have a true champion. I felt the Super Bowl was played earlier than it really was. You had better games leading up to the Super Bowl than the Super Bowl was. But guys get hurt. That's all part of it. You know what I mean? For example, I feel if you give Tom Brady Antonio Brown, they would have beat the Rams because that game was tied at the end of regulation.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I
I
think Antonio Brown completely screwed them over.
Just for example, you know what I mean? The Bills and the Chiefs. I just watched the ending of that game before we got on the podcast. It was on Facebook. I watched it. So crazy. If anything would have happened differently, Chiefs wouldn't have won. They lost anyway, but Joe Burrow, but I'm just saying, anything can happen. And the best driver, Pete Hansen, Trace Braun, Allen. I don't know him as well. I keep getting it wrong, but you throw any of them guys on the track, there's only going to be one winner. And 10 different times you could have 10 different winners. You almost have to have 30, 40, 50 shows a year and say, okay, this guy won 12, this guy won 9, the guy that won 12 is the best. But we can't do that in the derby world because you just plain can't,
No, it's been tried out there, and the thing is, we don't get paid to do this. So, crowning a true champion that way, in which you run a ton of events, is very hard to do because it limits your audience or your participants' ability to participate in the sport. Can I go do that? Yes, but am I going to spend the entire year building all those cars to go do that? No, I'm not. I have a life outside of a demolition derby.
Right. And there's the point series on top of that. So the guys that can run 30 shows a year are running that,
That's what I'm talking about. I'm referring to the point series. It's just, we don't get paid to do this sport. So it's very hard to to structure it that way.
Right.
You know, what you were saying though is if the season was, or if an injury or a play went this different, all right, we would have a different champion or a different Super Bowl. Well, guess what? History was written, and history was written with the Cincinnati Bengals going to the Super Bowl, right? And Joe Burrow, the start of maybe possibly Joe Burrow's stigma or persona of being Joe Burrow, right? And taking that team that got sacked the most, was the worst offensive line to ever possibly go to a Super Bowl. And Joey B was just Joey B, because maybe 10 years from now, we're saying he's the second coming of Tom Brady. And that's why he was able to do that. That's the narrative we want to be able to write with our drivers too. Yeah, there is only 2 chances this year, King of Ohio, King of Indiana, to run this format on that big stage. And there are going to be a lot of disappointments. But at the end of the day, we're going to be able to write a narrative that these guys are the baddest dudes on the planet. It doesn't matter what class you're in. These guys tackled the format. They beat their competition, and nobody else can say anything different. You know, it is what it is. History has to be written, and that's the way it's going to be written.
Yeah, it gives everybody a fair shot. It's not about who has the most friends. It's not even about who has the most money. You've got to have everything happen the right way. You got to build the car, you got to drive the car. I've always said that. You can build a living snot out of a car and wind up on the law or on the block. What good did it do you? You know what I mean? You got to drive it. And, you know, when it's 1 versus 1 versus 1, you've got to seal the deal in your heat, and then you've got to seal the deal in the feature. Not just go out there and, you know, phone in the heat. I've got 6 buddies with me. Gee, you know, there's 10 cars. It's automatic. You've got to beat your competition. You don't have any friends. You got to, you know, to get out of the heat, and then same story in the feature.
And you can make a little more friends in the feature, I'm sure, you know, with 20 cars possibly being out there. But I don't know how many friends I'm going to make, you know, or how long that friendship's going to last when there's 25,000 on the line. And I know I have to beat you, right? So, I mean, that friendship is going to be around until you make a mistake and put yourself in a compromised situation, and I go ahead and send you up over the wall, because I don't want to face Jarrod Blades, you know. And if I can take him out at 10, I'm taking him out at 10. You know, one thing last year that really, I wouldn't say it like I spent a lot of time thinking about it, but this is how people are. Okay. I'm really good friends with Allen's. So like I said, Sean Allen is the dad, and then Brady and Devin are the 2 sons. I'm pretty good friends with those guys, and everyone, you know, this is just how people, not everyone. Okay. It's always the small minority of people. Oh, you're friends with them, you're going to favor them, this and that. There is not anybody in the entire country, okay, that is doing more to put everything in the driver's hands than what we are. You can't have favorites. Like, if you're saying that, you know what you're doing? You're just making excuses of why you lost, okay, before it even happened. It turns out they ended up, there was 3 of them last year. 2 of the boys, they ended up getting beat. Then what narrative do you have then? You know, we don't help anybody. You're literally on the track in the group of 2. If you win, you win. If you lose, you lose.
Well, you know? I watched your podcast about making the call with TJ and Jordan Rutherford.
Yeah.
I thought, man, you guys are more at risk at getting your heads ripped off after a show than ever, because social media, I got screwed. Don't run for Dustin Woods. If the right 3 people say that, you're up a crick. So you have to treat people fairly this day and age, because it's going to get out that, hey, this guy had 4 extra plates on his car and it passed. There's going to be pictures of it on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you guys assume all the risk. We're just building the cars and bringing them. I'm not nearly as worried about somebody bad mouthing me. Who cares? I'm just a driver. You don't like me, bring a car and build it and run against me. So what? But as far as your livelihood goes, if you lose 20, 30 drivers, I mean, that could be detrimental to your future. I mean, promoters have to be on their game this day and age, for that reason. And again, it goes back to treating people fairly. I mean, in my opinion, you were the one on the golf cart, not one of your guys. It was you. Yep. That's why I said what I said. It wasn't one of your inspectors. It was you that said, I want you to run. Do this for me and come get your stick. And I watched you say it. And I was like, that's the kind of guy right there I want to run for.
Yeah, I mean, in that circumstance, I mean, that guy was far overbuilt to the class that he intended to run.
Well, he had a pre-run car from a different show, is what it was.
Yeah.
And you guys negotiated and worked something out. There's nothing worse. Let's say there's 3 5,000 to win shows in Michigan by 3 different promoters, and I can only run one of them because I've got to rearrange the whole car to run the next one, and then I've got to put all the crap back on it or change even more stuff to run the next one. You know what I mean? I'll build it and run 1,000 to win, a 1,500 to win, and then the 5,000 to win, rather than run the 3 5,000 to wins because I have to rearrange the car every time I want to run it. There's just nothing worse. I want to bring the car, tell me what to cut, and I want to run. And you've got promoters that are really, really good about that, and you've got ones that just plain aren't. And I know promoters that, I mean, yeah, they've got 5, 10, 15,000 to win shows. My car's sitting here, but it won't pass their rules, and they won't work with me enough on it to go run. So I've got to add, take stuff off, add again, back and forth. You know what I mean? And it's a pain as a driver. I don't get to run only one big show this year because these limited wild cars, you don't build 10 of them a year. You only build one, and you run it for maybe a year or 2 or 3. I mean, I'm still seeing cars that I ran against a wagon at Urban in 2019, and that same wagon just ran last weekend. 3 years later. I mean, these cars stick around a while, but they can only run certain shows because if you don't get a promoter that works with you, it just sits. And now I've got to pull all my stuff out of the car and build a new car to run this show, or that car just sits there until another show comes up, I can run it.
No, and I hear you, man.
That was the situation with the driver I'm talking about, is you guys said, bring it, we'll work with you. And he got to run that weekend because you guys were able to work with him. And that's huge as a driver. I feel I'm going to come back.
Yeah, well, that's what it's about. I mean, we're in this together. We've said this, our slogan is built by the drivers for the drivers. We understand what it's like to be a driver. We value that, and we want to make sure that our drivers are the focal point, of what we do.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest things about it. I don't know that I'd swap classes to run for a promoter like that, but I would definitely, I'd run a show in March and then probably wait until October to run again because, this guy's going to work with me. And that's one of the biggest things as a driver that I don't think gets talked about enough, is the promoters that are actually fair with inspection. I mean, there's fair, and then there's too lenient, and then there's too strict. And it seems like the same promoter is always both somehow. They want the dumbest thing cut, but they want the stupidest thing to pass. I've actually been to a show before. You could run a 4-foot long bumper bracket, but you couldn't weld the frame seams. How does that work?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, you're going to let this go, but not that.
I'm telling you, man, I hate beating this drum, but it's because of lack of organization, and they're not being a true sanctioning body of this sport. I mean, that's what it comes down to. That's how you have the stupid things. It's almost like backyard stuff at that point.
Well, what I'm trying to get at, and you said beating the same drum, what I'm trying to get at is this day and age, you've pretty much got a mod class in a class slightly below it to where the guy may not have an 8-lug postal or spindles, but they have engine cradles because everybody has them now, and bumpers and stuff. And then you've got the guys that don't have engine cradles. And what makes these steps happen is the cost of parts. So I don't have $6,000 for a postal and $1,500 for spindles, but I've got a homemade pointy I welded up myself, and I've got a built 5-lug. I don't want to go run against a guy that has all that, so there's a class for that. And then there's the guys that don't have the $2,000 engine cradle, don't have the $2,500 transmission setup, possibly don't even have a brace 10-bolt, probably don't have a replica bumper, and then you got the wire class. And those guys don't even have a 350 Chevy engine they can run. The cost is what breaks the classes down. And, pretty much anywhere you go now is like a lot of the promoters are on board with, as far as like a sanctioning body, you can have a mod class, whether kickers are allowed or not, or like a king class car where you're allowed a cradle and a bumper plate, Mayhem, Spring X type build, limited weld, Wicked, they were all kind of the same, similar anyway, and then you've got like bone stock, motor swap, lower cradle only, maybe creasing, maybe not a big deal difference wise, whatever. And then you've got the wire class. Now, for the most part, you can take a smash up wire class car and run it anywhere. For the most part, you can take a Spring X car and run it, in a limited weld class, or you can take a bone stock car and run it in the motor swap class, or you can take a mod car from Blizzard Bash, run mod class, put kickers in it, whatever they allow. Kickers aren't that big of a deal, it's really the only difference. So there is actually like this, like, it's almost like a social understanding that don't bring a limited weld car to a mod class, or don't bring a motor swap car into a limited weld class unless you got kickers in it and like a bunch of plates on it. And then really the only differences from there are like these little minute, like in the mod class kickers, motor swap class may or may not allow a trans brace, but really doesn't do much because you don't have a full cradle anyway. Wire class car, explains itself. It's a wire class. Whether we're rear wheel drive or not, depends on which promoter you're on for, whatever, I wanted to bring that up because I feel that gets talked about a lot, but nobody really looks at it that way, to where you're not going to see a motor swap class allow spindles. You know what I mean? For example, or you're not going to see like a wire class allow an engine swap. So I do kind of feel that this day and age, and I keep saying that, but this day and age, there's pretty good understanding between the different classes of builds. And it basically just promoters kind of pick, based on their area, what the best thing to allow is.
I hear you on that. And something interesting that you said is the cost of the class and how it breaks down. And that's something I'm going to really actually think about going forward. I wrote that down. That was really interesting.
I was referring to that earlier when I talked about the guy that built his Luminas and Camrys. Is the next step up is, like a rear wheel drive class motor swap. Well, I had a friend of mine was going to buy into motor swap class. Let me run this past you. Having nothing, he's in his early 20s. He wants to get into demolition derby. And he's ran gut and go cars and stuff. And this is a kid I would probably put in my car and say, go drive it. And he's a great driver, but he doesn't have the opportunity to run at the level against, Pete Hansen and Trace Braun and everybody that is registered in the King class. Well, just to buy into motor swap class, this isn't limited weld, this isn't mods. A decent 350 engine
Mm,
will cost anywhere from 1,500 to 3,500. And if you disagree with me, go ahead and just say, well, I can get something better. If you buy a $500 350, it's not going to be much. And a lot of these guys this day and age are running around 450 horsepower. A stock 350, I guess you better really know what you're doing, but I'd rather have more horsepower to get out of the way if somebody's coming at me with that kind of power.
mhm.
The car itself, most Fords, $500-600. So there's $2,000 easy. 10-bolt rear end, very hard to find. If you find one, $350. We're at 2,500. Pedals, 350, 2,800. Slider with the yokes, 750, 3,500. Tires, 23s are 125 a piece plus rims. $450 there easily. Almost $4,000 now. Need a bumper. So you're either going to weld one up or buy one. Well, a 74 bumper now is $300, $400. So that's 4,100, 4,200.
Do you think that we should have a spec class?
Cage steel, not, and the steel market just exploded. I'm very well aware of that.
Yeah.
A couple $100 there. You're talking 4,500, $5,000 to build a motor swap car. And that's not limited weld. That's just motor swap.
Do you think that we should have a spec class like that?
What do you mean?
Well, you said like a motor swap class. Do you think that we should say, all right, in our motor swap, we don't allow sliders, but where are you going to get drive shafts? Should we have someone produce an aftermarket drive shaft?
I don't think so. Sliders are easy to put in. I don't want to deal with building a drive shaft every time.
Okay.
It sucked. I remember those days. I did it. I always did it in the car, and I'd tack it and it'd do this, and I'd just tap it with a hammer until it straightened out, and then I'd weld it right in the car. It was the last thing I ever did, and my welding hood was always really, really like smoky, and I could never see very well because it was the last thing we were doing, and I wasn't going to change my lens just to do that. So my drive shaft welds were always sketchy. That's going back about 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, I think.
Those were the good old days.
I remember cutting drive shafts in half and putting a 400.
You need a transmission too, which is another 500 or 600. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So you're looking at $5,000 solid just to motor swap, just for motor swap.
It's crazy that the sport has progressed that far, yet like our payouts. We're the first person to increase payouts like that in like 20 years?
I would say that probably 15,000 to win would be the new 10. A 10,000 to win class with the King car is just a slap in the face. It's not even worth. I've got $10,000. I've got more than $10,000 into just my motor.
Yeah, but there's a fine line there, because if as a promoter you put out that money, okay, and you don't get the eyeballs, you don't get the people coming to the show, you can only put out that money for so long. Like, just because you get this caliber of drivers doesn't necessarily mean that the revenue is going to be coming in. You need revenue to come in. $10,000 is still $10,000 plus. You're putting on an event of our caliber. We're paying out $100,000 across the event.
No, I get it. I've heard what these shows cost to put on, and the last thing I would do is, double or triple payout what everybody else is doing based on the risk. I know exactly what you're talking about.
We did do that, and it is risky. Obviously we have some great partners, and I fund a lot of this, my wife and I ourselves, but like it is a risk. You do risk losing money.
Well, the other thing too is you've got drivers, especially like Blizzard Bash drivers, who are like, okay, I've got $10,000 into just my trailer.
Yeah.
40 grand to win is, you know what I mean? So there's a balance there.
Well,
You're,
listen, the Blizzard Bash is in a lot different situation than I'm in.
That's what
Blizzard
I'm
Bash
saying.
freaking packs the stands and they still only pay $40,000 to win.
That's
Now
exactly
they finally upped it.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You're probably about right with your payout. But for me to take if I built a king car and if it was 10 grand to win, wouldn't necessarily get my attention. And I hope other promoters are hearing me. Because again, I was at Mayhem last year and I walked up to a car and it had a giant gas tank in it. Huge, had to been 30 gallons. And I asked the driver, I said, "Are you running alcohol?" He goes, "No." So what are you running? It was 110. I said, $6, $7, $8 a gallon? He said, "Yeah." Well, you got 35 grand into the car. I was like, I kind of felt stupid. I know how much this stuff costs. But I'm not saying that derby drivers should make money at the shows that they run. But if you've got to rebuild a motor at that level, I just put 8 grand into mine and we reused most of the parts from last year. I didn't have to put $1,000 set of pistons in it because I reused them. I didn't have to buy a new set of heads because we reused them. I didn't have to buy a new set. I had to buy 2 rods. I bought a $50 crank off Marketplace. I run a 6.0 LS. The stock cranks will handle whatever horsepower you throw at them. If I had to buy a $1,500 crank, I'd have been 10, 12, 15 grand. New pistons, just the motor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a new Collier, 8,500. You know, a big one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just engine. That's not the $2,500 cradle. That's not the $2,500 transmission setup. That's not the $1,200, $1,500 bumper that a lot of guys run because honestly, you need them. I'm not knocking the vendors for charging what they charge. At that level, it's necessary to have those bumpers and engines. It is. Just plain is because everybody else has them. You have to have them. And like I say, a 10,000 to win pot, I'm going to put my stuff through, you know, World War II. May or may not win. And if I do win, it's 10 grand. I mean, yeah, it'll help. But with that kind of cash, you'll barely pay for your engine.
No, I hear you. No, it's good stuff. Well,
And
hey,
you know, if Blizzard Bash didn't have the prestige, those are $50,000 cars. There's no way I'd ever build one and run for 10 grand.
well,
I'm not knocking Blizzard Bash. I'm just saying. I'm not knocking the drivers. I'm just saying. If I got picked for a Blizzard Bash team, I would be on board tomorrow. I'd say, let's go. I want to run that show so bad. But you know, if it wasn't so prestigious, if it wasn't as big as it is, I'd say, man, the payout's a little bit light for the kind of money I got to put out. It cost me probably 5 grand just to get there.
I went out to watch and it cost me $2,500.
I had to upgrade my tickets. I had my 6-month-old at the time with us. I had to pay $50 to get her a pit pass. And we paid, I think we paid $175 online for our tickets. When we got there, I had to pay an extra $150 to upgrade them to get in the door after I stood in line for like an hour and a half.
Listen, the last comment I'll make on that, and then we can wrap this thing up, is I got no problem with a business making money, but I just want a business has to operate and make money.
Absolutely.
I just want them to progress the sport too. I think staying stagnant for 10 years at that same payout, either you're not charging enough, okay? Therefore, you're not making enough money to progress, all right? Or you're just lining your own pockets. There's one of two things going on, and you need to make sure that, you know, as a business, you need to progress, especially with what the drivers are putting into their cars, in my opinion.
Let me run this past you. 10 years ago, 10 grand would have bought a lot of good stuff on a car.
Yep.
There weren't ski spindles. There weren't postal Mopar rear ends. 2012, There weren't replica bumpers.
Nope.
Old iron was cheap. Bumpers were cheap. I don't know of anybody that was running 600 horse engines. Maybe they were, but I don't think guys were putting 10, 15,000 into their engines at the time. You've got all these parts coming out and they're allowing them in. You've got to, as a promoter, you've got to take into account what those costs are. And you've got to stay up to date with what these cars cost to build.
So you either need to charge, if you're going to pay more, but you can't pay more to the drivers, you need to either charge more for the entertainment so that way you can give back to the drivers, or you need to limit the cost on their build, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Like I don't care what option you agree with, you just got to do one or the other.
Yes, I 100% agree with that statement. The payout has to reflect the cost of the build, or you're going to lose steam. You're going to have drivers going other places that pay more with less time and money into their build, just for that reason alone. I mean, you can treat drivers as good as you want. You can have the best rules in the world. Again, none of us are getting paid to do this. And most of us have lives and families that are saying, hey, I just got the credit card statement here, and that's how you want the doghouse.
Yep, absolutely.
But,
well, hey man, good stuff. I appreciate you coming on. Go ahead and give a shout out to what you do. I know you were a big sponsor of our raffle car last year, and I want to thank you for that. So go ahead and give everybody your information.
Jarrod Blades, Michigan, Midland, Michigan right now, Beaverton, Michigan on my banner there. I sell steel tubing when I can find it. The only reason I sponsored Dustin's raffle car last year was because it was an imp. I'm just kidding. No. I run caddies right now. I like them a lot. I'm a driver, builder. I don't promote. I'm just a guy with a lot of opinions. I try to inform promoters on what drivers are saying, and hope to, in my own way, progress the sport, saying, hey, this idea wasn't very popular, or this idea is really working. I'll give good promoters a shout out. I will not say as much about ones I don't agree with as much. I think what Triple D is doing is good for the sport. I really do. It gives a lot of drivers a fair shot that they might not have had, making it out of the heat at a big show. Other promoters, are you okay with that if I mention some?
I don't care.
PJ McCulloch, Dead Man, I feel is doing a great job. I've never seen 38 half-ton trucks in one heat before. I don't know how he did it, but that guy has got it going on. Steve Siopa, Iron City Promotions, love what they do. Great rules, great turnout, great show. Toast, RCR, always slaps. TNT up here in Michigan, great guys, have lots of shows, pull lots of cars. Jack Fissler Jr. Owns USA, Derby Icons. Up here, he treats every driver the same. You know what you're going to get when you run for them, and they do a great job. I really think of anybody else off the top of my head. If I didn't mention you, I don't hate you, but this is what I see, and I'm only one person. So just because I didn't mention your name doesn't mean that you don't do a good job. My dad helps me out on my cars. He's really my go-to guy on everything. I've got another buddy, Brandon. He helps me out. My wife, my 10-month-old daughter, Nova. All my fans, if you guys watching this podcast, I hope I gave you some insight. Hopefully we made some good content today. It was a spur of the moment thing. Hopefully I can come back on at a later time and discuss some different topics. Maybe one day I'll get into the promoting game, but right now these guys up here have it pretty well handled. So I'm not really sure.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for joining us and giving us your opinion on a bunch of things. Not everybody's going to agree with everything that we said, but hey, that's all right. That's why they're opinions. So thanks for coming on and making the podcast episode. What are we on? Episode 5.
Yeah, I hope we get some views, and I hope maybe I get some compliments. If not, I guess I'll just ignore some messages I don't like.
There you go. Thanks, Jarrod. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good one.